New Zealand is a wonderful country containing many different cultures and religions, but maintaining traditional marriage rituals from its early years as a country. Our group, obviously chose to do New Zealand, as you can tell from what I just said. Naomi Sorovchik will be taking religion, Leanne Linares will be taking marriage, and I, Ryan Lindenfeld, will be taking the culture. The culture of New Zealand is rather diverse, yet they don't say it is. By that, I mean they don't acknowledge it. Instead of calling themselves Chinese New Zealanders, Maori New Zealanders, Black New Zealanders, White New Zealanders, they call themselves Kiwis. If you know Kiwi, it's a bird that is located on New Zealand. That's part of the reason they call themselves Kiwis. The other reason is so they have unifying factor. New Zealand and New Zealand have two different national anthems. That's probably why I said New Zealand and New Zealand. One of the national anthems is God Save the Queen, which it shares with Great Britain. And the other is God Defend New Zealand, which is interesting because its verses alternate between Maori and English. Now let's get to the Maori. Maori oral tradition states that people arrived on the island starting in as early as 1300 AD. One of the prominent historical figures is Kupe. According to the legend, Kupe killed his own cousin while they were on a fishing trip, then took his cousin's wife and went on a great trip to discover New Zealand. What they didn't know would be New Zealand at the time, but later became New Zealand. So, there's a lot of discrepancy between the dates because the Orthodox tradition actually states specified places and times, but other stories don't. So there's a bit of discrepancy between the timing of the events. So, an interesting thing to note about the Maori is that they call themselves Tangata Wenua, which means people of the earth, or people of the land. Those can be used pretty much interchangeably. The marae, which means cleared up forests or trees, is an important part of the Maori tradition. In older times, other indigenous New Zealand cultures had it too, but most of theirs have either been destroyed or lost. The Maori marae are still in existence and are still used a lot. Basically, the marae is a rectangular plot of land bordered with stones or wood or something like that. It sometimes has a central stone called an ahu, which is a central stone that's central to it. So, that's a little bit about the older culture. Even older and more known is the Hanji. The Hanji is similar to Eskimo kissing, where you rub noses. It looks something like that. So, after the Hanji, a person is no longer known as a... These words are really complicated. As a manuhiri, which means visitor. Instead, they are known as a Tangata Wenua. As I already said, it means people of the land. So, after doing the Hanji, the person basically becomes a part of New Zealand culture. I know what I'm ready for now. The food. There's very unique culture with the food. And one example of uniqueness is that the Maori had no alcoholic beverage. That's very, very rare for any group to not have an alcoholic beverage unique to them. I'm sure there's drink alcoholic beverages now because modernization and urbanization, but they originally had none. So, and another interesting thing is, since New Zealand is located where it is, there's a lot of geothermal energy. So, the food is either cooked in hanjis, which are earth ovens, or on the hot springs produced from the geothermal energy. Both of those are natural things. When the British came to New Zealand, they brought with them food, obviously. Two of the most impactful British food items were pork and potatoes. Since the British arrived, potatoes have become a very important part of Maori culture, specifically their agricultural economy. Excuse me. Now, some specialized foods for them are birds, fish, fern root, and sweet potato. It's rather cold. Okay. I'll now pass it over to my teammate and take it away.
Hello, my name is Naomi, and we're going to be continuing learning about New Zealand by diving deeper of the culture into the religion of New Zealand. In order to understand the religion of New Zealand, we have to actually go to the history, to the beginning. And this history and this beginning actually belong to the Maori people. Maori people have their own religions, not just one. Now, two main ones that we're going to be talking about today is the Ratana religion and the Ringatu religion. The Ratana religion was actually founded by a 20th century faith healer, and the other, which was Ringatu, by a 19th century prophet. Now, what's interesting about these religions is that they actually draw on elements of Christianity. They have actually derived and come from basic point of views of Christianity. Now, what is also very, very interesting about this religion is that each things were thought of as possessing a life force. That means that you have an ocean and then you have a god over an ocean, or something that has more spiritual welfare over that one thing. An example of this is Rongo, who people believe is an ancestor of cultivated plants. Now, tapu is something very powerful in the Maori religions. Each religion have tapu in them. Now, to understand tapu, we have to actually understand a different word called manu, which is spiritual power or essence. And it was believed that mana is in objects and in people. You have higher rank and you have lower rank. Lower rank cannot mess with objects of higher rank, and neither can higher rank mess with things of lower rank. If you're a cook who works for higher rank, you cannot eat the food of the higher rank. If you do, you would either be put to death by the person that was offended that you touched their food, or you would actually have, they believed you would get some kind of sickness that would put you to death. Also, you can't share clothing as much as you can not share food. Then came along a missionary called Samuel Martin. This missionary was different than other missionaries of the world and did not point a gun or knife to someone's face and say Christianity or death, ciao. But instead, he actually gave people of New Zealand freedom, and it was generally being voluntarily instead of forced. Around half of New Zealanders identify themselves as Christian. Main Christian denominations include Anglican, Presbyterian, and Catholic. Now, as many people call themselves something and actually don't do it, or think of themselves as someone and actually don't have reasons behind it, it is also true of New Zealand. About a quarter of them actually attend church regularly. Christian churches and their social organizations are less influential in New Zealand society as they used to be. That means they have been decreasing instead of increasing. Now, that means that there has become no religion. People over the years, as the years have become closer to this year, have been increasing to non-Christians. And here we have an example that we got from WordPress.com. In 1996, which was not a long time ago, we have in blue Christians and in red non-Christians. 63.0% call themselves Christians and 25.5% said that they had no religion. This is what they claimed. Now in 2013, you see that it is much more closer, that 49.1% claim themselves as Christians, while no religion people were 41.5%. So as the years have come closer, we see that religions have been changing. Now, the last type of religion that we're going to be talking about is the diversity of religion. Because as time changes, new people come into New Zealand, and that means that they have different cultures, and the landscape of religion is changing. This includes Hinduism, Buddhist, Islam, and spiritualism, which are the largest of minority religions today in New Zealand. Example, by 2010, there were more than 50,000 Hindus and Buddhists in New Zealand. New Zealand now has no state religion, and since the treaty that was signed, they have freedom of religion and is protected. So you can choose your religion, you aren't forced to have one.
In New Zealand, there are many cultures and religions and celebrations of all the cultures and weddings. Alongside the typical modern-day wedding, New Zealand hosts weddings for all people and all cultures and all religions. Traditional weddings, modern weddings, and anything in between. New Zealand's modern-day wedding have incorporated traditions and customs of the Maori tribe. Traditions such as the newlywed couple being blessed by the Maori tribal leader for a happy marriage. In the Maori tradition, the bride and groom wear infinite loops around their necks to symbolize their never-ending love. Maori weddings can take place in the following places: Malakoi Island, Taumaki Village, Poha Geyser, Aurora Peak, Four Canyons, and Fairy Springs. Each location has a specific tradition or ritual that takes place. Most of them which include partying, songs and dances, feasting, vows, and some even have symbolic rituals. As an example, the groom places a kaurakai, a love cloak, around the woman he is marrying, and it symbolizes that his love will surround her for the rest of her life. The Maori ritual is very sacred and very meaningful to their people. While the cultures and beliefs of India differ from New Zealand, they have quite a few weddings of Hindu religion there. Indian weddings are typically divided into 4 different ceremonies, including the pre-wedding ceremony, the main wedding nuptials, the vadi, and lastly the post-wedding ceremony. The pre-wedding ceremony typically involves close family and can start many days before the actual wedding. It starts with worshiping the family's god, and then the bride and groom are then colored in turnip sauce, mustard oil, henna on grass twigs, and usually it's a really fun process for everybody, and they all make the bride and groom look extremely beautiful. The main wedding, the bride and groom exchange garlands thrice as a symbol of their unification. Once the gift giving exchange between the bride and groom and giving away the bride by her father as a present to the new husband, the groom then ties a tali, a sacred thread, around the bride, and the couple then walks around the ceremonial fire. The groom then places the rings on the bride's toes. Unlike the traditional weddings of India, New Zealand Indian typically have the right to choose their partner they wish to marry, as compared to the arranged marriages in the homeland. Parents do not choose their child's partner. Arranged marriage is not uncommon in Chinese cultures either. The whole family in Chinese cultures takes place in the arrangement. However, differences between Indian and Chinese culture is that romance was allowed in the Chinese culture. Monogamy was also practiced. In Chinese culture, the son-in-law would move into the bride's house to turn the man into a monogamous man out of a polygamous man. In Chinese culture, a marriage is the most important and significant event in a person's life. Though now traditionally Eastern weddings have been practiced by the Chinese and has embraced more of the Western wedding style. Weddings are just a small part in New Zealand, and with the many religions and many countries that are all mixed up inside this one little island, they embrace the differences between each other and bring out the best in everyone in every culture.